Pursuant to provisions of Standing Order 227, the petition stands committed to the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare for consideration. I urge the committee to engage the petitioners and commence the process of drafting legislation to address the prayers of the Kenya Girl Guides Association. I thank you. Next order. I think on this particular order, we are not through with it. I therefore give opportunity to Honorable Brighton Yegon, MP Konoin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm hereby representing a petition regarding neglect and exploitation of smallholder tea farmers by Kenya Tea Development Agency, KTDA. I draw attention of the House to the following. One, that since inception, tea growing in Kenya has expanded rapidly, making it a significant contributor to Kenyan economy through exports with a direct impact to over 3 million smallholder tea farmers. That tea growing in Kenya is regulated by various policies established by Kenya Tea Directorate under Agriculture and Food Authority Act of 2013. That Kenya Tea Development Agency was incorporated in the year 2000 to liberalize tea industry and enable tea farmers to exercise control over the management of their factories through board as management agents. And that also KTDA has given itself additional mandates. For instance, acting as a marketing agent for farmers, investing farmers' money in subsidiary companies, taking part in key decision-making process, and hence locking farmers out. And even provision of secretariat services and taking up the ownership of tea factories among others. And that also KTDA has monopolized and taken over the management of the entire smallholder tea factory companies, and this constitutes a strong strategic barrier against entry of new managing agents. And that the monopoly has occasioned poor service delivery, low farm productivity, low product innovation, and high farm cost, leading to high indebtedness of tea factories. And that KTDA charges farmers a management fee of 2.5%, yet the factories still pay salaries to the said managers, leading to double payment and misappropriation. That also KTDA sells tea produced by farmers on quarterly basis, but only declares one-off bonus to farmers. That the issues in respect to which this petition is made are not pending before any court of law and constitutional or statutory body. Therefore, my humble prayer is that National Assembly, through Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock, one, investigate and inquires into all matters raised in this particular petition pursuant to Standing Orders 216/5A, and make the relevant recommendation thereof. Recommends formulation of policies and regulations to cushion farmers from exploitation by KTDA, formulation of regulations to limit licensing of one agent to undertake multiple functions for purposes of fairness and equity and inclusivity. I also recommend establishment of smallholder tea farmers association to look into welfare matters of tea farmers, for instance, training, enhancement of farmers' representation at the regional, national, and international levels, among others. I recommend that proceeds of tea sales be sent directly to factories and the factories to pay KTDA. I also recommend that once the 2.5% management fee has been paid to KTDA, then KTDA to pay their staff. I also recommend that declaration of second payment or what they call it, bonuses, be done on quarterly basis. That is the declaration. And finally, make any other order or direction that is deemed fit in the circumstance of the matter. And your petitioner will ever pray. Thank you so much, Mr.
That's a very long petition. You know, sometimes the members will get lost somewhere because it's extremely long. But anyway, you have presented it. So I will give maybe 2 members or maximum 3 to talk on this particular one. We will start with Honorable Murungi Kadhuri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wanted to give a very brief comment on this petition brought by
the tea sector. It is a matter that is very weighty. They says, Mr. Speaker, like in your constituency, I'm sure you will agree with me that money for cess used to be released by the Kenya Tea Development Authority, which went into the fixing of the roads. But now, you know, roads have been devolved to the county governments. And some of the counties are actually not fixing the roads where the tea is passing through. Even the tea buying centers, Mr. Speaker, before CDF used to build these tea buying centers, and this has been devolved to the county governments. And you find that, like in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, you will find that farmers are waiting for 12 hours, if not 14, for their tea.
A comment would be sufficient, Honorable.
Thank you, sir. So I would like to say that the Agricultural Committee, the ball is in your hands, and let us interrogate this matter as members of this House to come with issues on how to solve the tea sector problems. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, that is referred to the Committee on Agriculture. Next, Honorable Michael Thoya Kingi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to present a petition regarding the possession of ancestral land. I, the undersigned, on behalf of the residents of Sabaki Ward of Magarini constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. That before independence, the residents of Sabaki Ward were forcibly evicted from their ancestral land and relocated by the colonial government to pave way for the establishment of Kisima Farm owned by a foreign national. That the forceful eviction and subsequent relocation was done without any compensation, despite the abandoned farms being rich in cash crops like cashew nut trees, coconut trees, mango trees, among others. That after independence, the Kenyan government repossessed Kisima Farm, including the land, and invested into Agricultural Development Corporation, ADC, Asset Corporation, and later renamed Sabaki Farm. That with time, the once thriving livestock enterprise started to dwindle under the management of ADC. The local residents felt that this was a deliberate attempt to allow well-connected individuals to get easy access to the prime land. That the ADC management has illegally allocated the land to well-connected individuals and have them issued with title deed. That the National Land Commission, via a letter dated 13th March 2015, addressed to the Kilifi County Commissioner, confirmed that ADC management was allocating land illegally to individuals. That residents who were evicted from Sabaki Ward ADC Farm are currently squatters on land which is not arable. That efforts to have the matter resolved with relevant government agencies have been futile, and that the matter in respect of which this petition is raised is not...
Honorable Dr. Pukose, and also Endebe's volleyball team. I am informed, whose information is not verified yet, that they played with the Bunge FC at Kasarani. So I'm not able...
Mr. Speaker, it's embarrassing.
Please let's not talk about Gorma here.
It's very embarrassing to hear we lost 8-1. And I'm keen to find out who our members in that football team are. And in order to reclaim the glory of this House, Mr. Speaker, Please allow us to disband that team and replace it with the ladies, led by Millie Odhiambo, Mr. Speaker.
Well, as I give, order members, as I give the dependable striker of the Bunge football team, Honorable Omboko Milemba, I would like to confirm that, and I take legislative notice. Order members. I take legislative notice of the fact that most of the members of the Bunge football team were participating in a prayer meeting this morning. And that is probably what could have created the issue. So let's hear Honorable Mboko Milemba. What is it that you have to say?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to assert that it's not in order for both the leadership to say that we need to disband Bunge FC. Bunge FC has got great players, including myself, who is our next international leader. I want to put it to your notice that away from working for the teachers, I played for the Premier League in Kenya, both AFC Leopards, and I also played for the national team. And therefore, Bunge FC has got the correct players, except, Honorable Speaker, Bunge FC has not been given favorable support to play well. For instance, Bunge FC is not having a coach currently, and Bunge FC is not having kits, and therefore we should be appealing to the Commission to actually fund Bunge FC so that the players of great potential like myself can actually produce their maximum. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You know, Honorable Jimmy Angwenyi, I hear you have an information now. I'm not so sure whom you want to inform. Now, the House, it will be very difficult for the House to accede to your information because, you see, I do not know who will make the decision to accept your information. Well, it will be unprocedural, but since you are a very old member of this House, a great-grandfather at that,
Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the House that if our team is composed of people with big tummies like Honorable Milemba and myself, then we have no reason to complain that we lost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm a proud member of Endebess FC, which is our constituency team, both football and volleyball. And they were actually very happy, Mr. Speaker. Some of them have never come to Nairobi. This is their first time. And also playing against honorable members. It was a honor for them. So I want, just to confirm that Honorable Milemba is the one who scored the one goal. So, Mr. Speaker, my boys, my boys are very happy, and I think we are glad that they played against parliamentary team, and it was a good team. They can confirm that Parliament is a good team. Then, yes. You know, Mr. Speaker, my boys also run in the hills of Mount Elgon. So
can you also confirm
that
they are natives, they are local boys?
Yes, they are local boys.
Okay.
Yes.
That is okay. Let's hear Honorable Millie Odhiambo, and then we come to the end of that matter after giving...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I'm even shocked to learn that they were beaten 8-0 or 8-1. And Mr. Speaker, why I'm shocked is because I applied to be a member of Bunge FC, and they have refused to admit me, telling me that it is all male, which is unconstitutional. Mr. Speaker, if I had been admitted in that team, we would have been the ones scoring 8, and the other side would have gotten 0. Mr. Speaker, where I come from, Suba North, we have what you call Suba Lakers, which is all female team that is the best nationally. So why are you wasting resource here, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, we are very endowed. If we can't use the legs, Mr. Speaker, we know how to deal, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Honorable Millie Odhiambo, you probably need... You probably need to take the Super Lakers to meet the Endebess FC. What is the Honorable Member 001 interested in saying? And we finalize that one.
Honorable Speaker, as we disband the Bunge FC, let me suggest that I be given the opportunity to be the goalkeeper because persons with disability are given by law that they should always be accompanied by their aides. So I will be with my aide at the goalpost, and you can be assured that we will not lose. But in other words, to massage our ego, we actually lost by, we had -8, they had 1. So thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I'll be the goalkeeper.
I do not want to open that too much. Honorable members, I think that is enough. We can move to the next order. The next order. Next order. Oh, yes. So we'll have the leader of majority party.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, November 8th, 2018. The Beijing Treaty on Audio-Visual Performance adopted by the Diplomatic Conference on 24th June 2012 and the explanatory memoranda. Mr. Speaker, the House should note that the Beijing Treaty on Audio-Visual Performance was laid on the table of the House in June 2017 during the tail end of the 11th Parliament. Therefore, it was never considered by any relevant committee then. I urge the chairperson of the Committee on Information, Communication and Technology to ensure that the treaty is considered and the report tabled for consideration by the House as soon as possible.
The Global Disability Summit, London, United Kingdom, held from 23rd to 24th July 2018, to the 11th session of Conference on State Parties to the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability, held at the UN headquarters, New York, from 12 to 14 June 2018. Third, the one was...
Order, Honorable Millie Odhiambo. I think you are canvassing in the wrong place. The captain of the Bunge football team is Honorable Shinali. It is not those two members you are seated with.
Thank you. Third, Mr. Speaker, the 107th session of International Labour Conference held in Geneva, Switzerland on 27th May to 8th June 2018. And finally, the 37th session of Human Rights Council held at the UN headquarters, Geneva, from 5th to 9th March 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's have the chairperson, Departmental Committee on Education and Research.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House. Today, Thursday, November the 8th, 2018, report of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research on the petition on hiring, posting, and transfers of primary school female teachers.
Very well. Let's have the next one. Let's have the chairperson, Committee on Member Services and Facilities.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to raise the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, November 8th, 2018. The third report of the Committee on Member Services and Facilities on our study visit to the New Zealand House of Representatives from 11th to 16th June 2018.
Very well. Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House. Today, Thursday, November 8, 2018. The reports of the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing on the consideration of public petitions by 1. Residents of the National Housing Corporation Tenants Welfare Association in Changamwe constituency, Mombasa County. 2. The Transport Operators Workers Union of Kenya on creation of regulation of digital taxi cab operators e-hailing apps in Kenya. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Okay, next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Okay. The Vice Chairperson, Select Committee on National Government Constituencies Fund, has the floor. Honorable Omar Mohammed Maalim.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Select Committee on National Government Constituency Development Fund on constituency digital innovation hubs, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, October 25, 2018. Thank you.
Let's have the Chairperson, Committee on Members, Services and Facilities, Honorable Ezekiel Machogu Mbaki.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion, that the House notes the third report of the Committee on Member Services and Facilities on a study visit to the New Zealand House of Representatives from 11th to 16th June 2018, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, November 2018. November 8th.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
Starting with the questions, we will have Honorable Christopher Aseka Wangaya, member for Quisero constituency, having the first shot.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to ask question number 98 of 2018 to the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury and National Planning. A, to provide the list of externally funded projects per county for the last 3 years. B, what measures has the government put in place regarding monitoring and evaluation of externally
departments and agencies to engage the services of the National Youth Service graduates in provision of security and manning of government offices, in addition to employing the services of police and other uniformed officers.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. And that marks the end of the question time. We now move to statements. And we have a statement from Honorable Ali Wario. Requesting for statement, or you want to give a statement?
To give a statement, Mr. Speaker.
Giving a statement?
Yes.
Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. On the sitting of Thursday, 28 June, the Honorable Catherine Waruguru MP, member for Laikipia County, requested for a statement from the Chairperson Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare regarding adoption of children in Kenya pursuant to Standing Order 44-2C. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I wish to take this opportunity to thank Hon Waiguru for raising this very important matter in the House. I wish to assure this House that my committee is very concerned with the issues affecting vulnerable persons that fall under its purview, such as the youth, women, the disabled, and the children, particularly recognize the fact that children's fate almost always lies in the hands of the other decision makers, and it is therefore incumbent upon us all to protect children at all times, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, allow me to respond to the specific issues raised by Hon Waruguru. The first issue, Mr. Speaker, is the report on all child adoption so far for the last 10 years. Mr. Speaker, from 2008 to 2017, we had 2,617 local adoption, 84 foreign residents adoption, 472 intercountry adoption, which gives us a total of 3,173 adoptions. Mr. Speaker, on the second issue, status on the specific case of Monica Kawira from Nkubu, in Meru County. The matter involved two children who had been given out for adoption while their parents and families are available and willing to raise them. The mother had gone to court to stop the adoption, both local and inter-country, so as to take her children back and raise them with other siblings. The judge, however, Mr. Speaker, gave a ruling dismissing each of the applications and allowed the adoption to proceed. The matter was appealed and is still pending in court. The family of the children were easily found by Child Welfare Society of Kenya, a demonstration that adequate tracing had not been carried out in the beginning. This is therefore implies that professionally and technically, the family member should be given back their children. On the third issue, Mr. Speaker, on the mechanism put in place to ensure safety of children adopted locally and internationally, we proposed the operationalization of the Counter-Trafficking in Person Act 2010, enhance and clear oversight and monitoring of adoption services by the National Adoption Committee, Adoption Month celebrations, enhanced stakeholder collaboration to facilitate networking to ensure an increase in prioritization of adoption by Kenyan families. The list is long, Mr. Speaker. For the interest of time, I will end there, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Next is Honorable Gladys Atieno Nyasuna Dashwanga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 44-2C, I wish to request for a statement from the Chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research regarding the increased teenage pregnancies in the country, as highlighted during the just concluded KCPE and ongoing KCSE exams. Honorable Speaker, teenage pregnancy in Kenya among school-going girls has become a worrying and is alarming, to say the least. Mr. Speaker, teenage pregnancies refers to girls between ages 15-19 getting pregnant. Mr. Speaker, these cases of early teenage pregnancies in Kenya have diverse effects, not only to the individual, but also the community as a whole. Honorable Speaker, according to the demographic survey of 2014, early childbearing is highest in counties. According to the KDHS of 2014, early pregnancies are high, teenage pregnancies are highest within the counties of Narok, followed by Homa Bay County at 33.3%, followed by Nyamira and other counties within the country. Honorable Speaker, in this regard, I wish to request for a statement from the Chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Education and Research on particularly the causes of the increase in teenage pregnancies in the country, and more importantly, the steps being taken to ensure that this very grave problem is addressed conclusively. Mr. Speaker, what we have seen recently is knee-jerk. We have seen officials in the ministry talking about arresting parents whose children have been found to be pregnant, which would not be a solution. But we have also seen the great concern that has been raised, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the statement that I'd like to request, especially as a member from Homa Bay County, which is second only to Narok in terms of teenage pregnancies. We are seeing our babies. The highlight of these examinations that are just been concluded and the ones that are ongoing is not even cheating or whatever else that has been there in the past. It has been the number of students that are actually doing their exams in hospital. So, Mr. Speaker, that is my request for statement. Thank you.
Well, there is a detail we had been asked to produce, but it seems you overlooked. But I will place that before the relevant Committee on Education and hope it would be tackled fairly urgently. That's actually a very serious Yes, what do you have to say, Honorable Kimunya? No, you don't have the floor, Honorable Wanga.
Honorable Chair, Speaker, I obviously do recognize that the problem that Honorable Wanga has brought is a major problem, but I'm actually lost in terms of whether it's actually being placed in the right committee. The issue of teenage pregnancy is not an education issue. It's a social issue. It's only that it's manifesting itself and being found in the schools. So I think it's something that we need to guidance from you, Mr. Speaker, because we may be able to look at the teenagers in schools.
What is your point of order, Leader of Majority Party?
No, it is, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kimunya, the Vice Chair of Education, cannot run away from dealing with this matter. We are not dealing with other pregnancies. We are dealing with the pregnancies of girls going to school. That's precisely. Those others who are getting pregnant out there is not our business. And it's not the business of Honorable Wanga. But for record also, Garissa County has 0 pregnancy rate for girls. Because, no, we have said the leading county is Narok, followed by Homa Bay. And at the bottom there is Garissa County with 0. So they should consult me for the strategies and advice.
So what the Leader of Majority is saying, that we are basically dealing with student pregnancy.
Yes.
Nothing to do with Honorable Wanga, Honorable Swaipan, you know, and the rest. It is specifically now. It will come before your committee. No, out of order. Out of order. So let us proceed. Let us proceed. That matter is settled. I have made the decision. I have made the decision. First of all, order, honorable member from, it's not Mbita anymore, it is Suba North. Now, the Honorable Wanga made a request for a statement, and it was directed to the Departmental Committee on Education, and I agree with her. So it does not matter. The issue is that, well, what is it, Honorable Danita? Maybe it's something else?
Mr. Speaker, this is an issue of national importance. And Mr. Speaker, when we put it so far away, Mr. Speaker, it might lose. Mr. Speaker, we want to discuss this issue, Mr. Speaker, now. And Mr. Speaker, it is just in order that we discuss this issue, Mr. Speaker. It is not a matter of when someone started to engage, Mr. Speaker. It is an issue of national importance. Mr. Speaker, parents are supposed to be celebrating the results of their children sitting KCPE, Mr. Speaker, not celebrating the birth of new ones, Mr. Speaker, again. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a it's an issue of national importance, Mr. Speaker.
I totally agree with you, Honorable Danita Gatti. Other members, now, out of order. Now, Honorable Danita, I agree with you totally that this is an extremely matter of utmost national importance. I agree with you totally. Now, the only problem is the person in Honorable Wanga, when she made a request for a statement. It is absolutely not possible for us to discuss it now, as you would want, because there are methods and processes. So, honorable members, what I would be asking the chair of education is how much time he would require. That is, I think, more relevant. Out of order.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what the agitation is for. We have listened, we have undertaken, we will bring a report to the House within 2 weeks.
You know, looking at 2 weeks, let's look at it, Honorable Kimunya. I know, of course, you have to go through the normal rigors, but 2 weeks is about the time that we'll be going on recess. Is it possible that you can do it a little earlier? Or you think your hands are tied?
Mr. Speaker, as you know, the ministry is already doing some investigation. It's in the middle of exams, so getting all those people to come may be a challenge. And we don't want to interfere with the exams. So I would rather we take our time, get down to the root of this problem, and see how we can save for the future.
I think that is reasonable. That's reasonable. 2 weeks you are granted. Next order. No, let's have the leader of majority party, please. Leader of majority party. What is it, Honorable Wanga? Because, what is it, Honorable Wanga? Honorable leader of majority, I think. What is it? You have asked and you've been
Speaker,
given the timeline.
the Speaker, the matter that was raised by the Honorable Kimunya, I think was a critical issue in the sense that this is a multi-stakeholder issue. It will involve education, but it involves security, it involves gender affairs. So I hope as education looks at it, they are also able to bring in those specific stakeholders.
Agreed.
I am requesting that happens. But Mr. Speaker, I had raised this matter as an adjournment motion, but it is advisory from your office that this came as a statement. But I thought this was a matter that was of interest, that should have come in form of an adjournment motion, so that members had an opportunity to express themselves adequately on it, even as education looks at it.
I can confirm that the route that you have taken is actually going to be more useful. Because if we just discuss it as an adjournment motion, there are no resolutions that will be made. It is much better when the detail, because you see here is a situation where there will be an interaction. You yourself have stated that you want, it is a multi-sectoral issue.
Yeah.
So you want all the departments to be involved. Now, if it is discussed as an adjournment motion, I mean, you know, you have been here long enough.
No,
Honorable Wanga.
Mr. Speaker, I'm much obliged. I am well advised.
Yes.
But if Honorable Millie could put in a word, that would be really good, because she's a senior in these issues.
Proceed, Honorable Leader of Majority Party.
Speaker, you have to be very careful on certain issues. This is a very hot matter, but that is the route we'll take. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 44, subsection 2A, I rise to give the following statements on behalf of the House Business Committee. The committee met on Tuesday this week at the rise of the House to prioritize business for consideration. On Tuesday next week, Mr. Speaker, the following bills have been scheduled for debate in second reading. The Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill number 4 of 2018. This is the bill that is meant to actualize Article 27, subsection 8 of the Constitution on the principle of not more than 2/3 of the members of elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender. We'll also deal with, in the second reading, the Government Contracts Bill number 9, 2018, the National Flags, Emblem, and Names Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 8 of 2017, the Parliamentary Service Commission Bill number 6 of 2018, and the Assumption of Office of the County Governor Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, the House Business Committee has also scheduled the 22nd report of the Public Investment Committee on State Corporation for consideration by the House on Tuesday next week. Honorable Speaker, the ratification of the following agreements, treaties, and protocols by the National Assembly have inordinately been delayed by the following committees. And Speaker, I hope chairs are here. Number 1, the bilateral air service agreement between Kenya and Jordan, Kenya and Jamaica, Kenya and Bahamas, and the protocol amending the bilateral air service agreement between Kenya and Turkey, which is before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. The revised constitution of the African Civil Aviation Commission, which is also before the same committee. Third, the East African Community Protocol on Information, Communication and Technology, which is before the Committee on Regional Integration. The protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products, which is before the Committee on Health. The Intergovernmental Convention on International Hydrographic Organization, which is before the Committee on defense and foreign relations. The agreement for the establishment of International Anti-Corruption Academy as an international organization, which is before the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs. The delay is largely attributed to the fact that respective committees are yet to table their report on the said instruments which were referred to them. I urge the chairpersons of these 5 committees to fast-track the consideration of the respective instruments and table reports before the House as soon as possible to allow the House to consider them. It is the intention of the House Business Committee to ensure that we conclude with all these agreements, treaties, and protocols before we proceed on the long recess, which is 4 weeks away. Honorable Speaker, in accordance with the provisions of Standing Order 42A, subsection 5, relating to questions, I wish to convey that having consulted with the chairperson of the Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare, Environment and Natural Resources, Energy, Sports, Culture and Tourism, Transport, Public Works and Housing, and Administration and National Security, the following questions are scheduled for reply by specific Cabinet Secretaries. The Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection will appear before the Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on Tuesday, 13th of November 2018 to answer question number 040 by Honorable David Olosenkok, question 052 by Honorable Bernard Shinali, question 053 from Honorable David Gikaria. 2, Cabinet Secretary for Water and Sanitation will appear before the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on Tuesday, 13th November 2018 to answer question number 056 from Honorable Zulekha Hassan. 3, Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and Wildlife will appear before the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on Thursday, 15th November 2018 to answer question number 088 from Honorable Aden Haji. And question number 1, you will be tabling progress report in the House on the status of questions before committees. Finally, Honorable Speaker, the House Business Committee will reconvene on Tuesday, 13th November 2018 at the rise of the House to consider business for the coming week. I now wish to lay this statement on the table of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, yes, whereas I would say all the statements given on the floor of the House should be taken very seriously, this one particularly should be taken extremely seriously, because if the questions are before certain committees, it does not matter whether the members will be there or not, the questions will be answered anyway. And for members who will not be available, probably they will have a written statement. Then they will therefore not have a good opportunity to interrogate. So members should take that very seriously. What is your point of order, Honorable Millie Odhiambo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Majority Leader for what is read about order of business next week. Mr. Speaker, I would just like the Majority Leader to clarify why it is not in the interest of the House for the House business to prioritize amendment to the Sexual Offences Act, given the high number of cases of girl pregnancies in schools, especially touching Homa Bay as number 2, Mr. Speaker. Why they have not prioritized amendments by Honorable Florence that touch on sexual offenses, because the issues of girl pregnancies is a sexual offense matter. It's not just an education issue, and we need our police to come in, arrest and jail the people who are making schoolgirls pregnant, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps what the Honorable Majority Leader was saying in terms of evidence, in terms of learning that he would want to teach us, is one that I know in Islamic culture they do not tolerate people who joke with schoolgirls. And I think that standard and measure that is put in the Islamic faith must be put in our laws and in our implementation, Mr. Speaker, so that even in cases like that, we must deal with them very seriously. I did not like the first time when Honorable Njoki proposed castration, But perhaps this is the time to castrate people who are joking with our girls, Mr. Speaker. So my question is, why haven't they not, House business, not prioritize cases of sexual violence, especially touching on girls? The bill that is coming, that is being brought by Honorable Florence Mutua.
Well, let me hear from the leader of Majority Party. What is it?
Speaker, the House Business Committee, which I can authoritatively speak on its behalf, deals with the matters that are alive, bills that are either mature or published. But you know, if Honorable Florence wrote to the Speaker, and out there's a letter saying that there is a bill on sexual offenses, the only private members bill which the House Business Committee and Honorable Kimunya will agree with me is the one by Honorable member for Honorable Njagagwa on retirement benefits. So I will check, maybe it is somewhere in the pipeline, and once it is published, we will give it a priority, Honorable Millie. And I agree with you, Homa Bay cannot be number one. And you're coming from there, you are a serious activist. So Homa Bay cannot lead in...
Well, I will reorganize. I will reorganize and probably let's take one more minute. Who is the member who wanted to speak on this particular one so that we can finalize some of these things? That is Honorable Danita Gatti. You have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, allow me time, Mr. Speaker, to organize myself. Thank you.
What did you say? You are ready now. Carry on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to actually say that the issue that is touching this country as of now, Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, is an issue that also touches on sexual reproductive health, Mr. Speaker, of our young girls and of our children. Mr. Speaker, I think for me, it is an issue that for a long time, it is an issue that has never been really taken as a serious issue. But Mr. Speaker, I think it's high time that this country recognizes and knows that issues SRH, sexual reproductive health, and issues of our girls, Mr. Speaker, are something that really needs to be addressed as a human rights issue, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, as of now, Mr. Speaker, you have seen the number of young girls, Mr. Speaker, for example, who are presently, Mr. Speaker, in this scenario where we are finding every school, Mr. Speaker, as our young girls are doing their exams, there are so many young girls, Mr. Speaker, sitting their papers, their KCPE papers, Mr. Speaker, in the wards. Mr. Speaker, this is extremely wrong, Mr. Speaker, at a time when our parents and our communities, Mr. Speaker, are expecting results in January, Mr. Speaker, celebrating. Mr. Speaker, babies are good to be celebrated, Mr. Speaker. Babies are the gift from God to be celebrated. But, Mr. Speaker, babies are not to be celebrated at this time when parents are supposed to be celebrating exams of their children who have sat their exams. So, Mr. Speaker, for me, I would support Honorable Millie Odhiambo, Mr. Speaker, even when we're talking about sexual offenders. Mr. Speaker, we need to address.
Order, Honorable Danita Gatti. I think we have gone back to the Honorable Wanga's statement, and yet I was actually we were discussing the one from the leader of Majority Party. Now, let's have something from the Chair Finance. Honorable Limo. Honorable Limo, and you should be brief. Honorable Limo, are you in the House? Yes, proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak to a question which was asked by Honorable Junet.
Go straight to the
which
point.
Was, yes, which, Mr. Speaker, which was concerning the implementation status of what we passed in this House and Finance Bill, which was actually on regulations which are governing banking issues in this country.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, we were, as a Finance Committee, we were unable to have a chance to meet the Governor of Central Bank together with the members of Bankers Association because the Governor is away. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask for more time that we respond to this question next week. Next week on the 15th, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 9, motion, report on the audited financial statements for the political parties fund for the year ended June 2017.
Now, honorable members, we are resuming debate which was interrupted on Wednesday, 17th November 2018, morning sitting. And I'll give the floor to Honorable Rindikiri Mwirwidhania, member for Buri. Not interested? Who was on the floor? Bunyasi. Honorable Bunyasi, you want to, you had spoken for 3 minutes? So you had a balance of 7 minutes.
I've spoken for 3 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me pick up from where I left off. Mr. Speaker, I think my comments at the time were, the thrust of my comments at the time was the utility of this fund and how it is important to support priority actions that require long term to develop, like I talked about affirmative action, the gender dimension, the lack of experience in politics by youth and by young women and others, and also the opportunity to help parties deepen civic education. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you know, we are not yet at a point at which the adherence to our parties is based entirely on ideology. It may be based on many other factors, but as we admire the older democracies, we are saying, irrespective of the diversity that exists in countries like India, for example, that ideology seems to play a big role, and these kinds of funding are the ones that will be able to help that chain along the way, so that we get where we want to aspire, that we differ on issues that we see affect us, and collectively we can then be a minority or majority in our setup. Mr. Speaker, but there are also other more mundane but issues at home that, like in 2017, for instance, we had a party and a major big political party and a major coalition, and the law recognizes this principally through parties, even though the major coalition had its instruments deposited with the register of political parties, therefore binding it legally and giving it a legal persona, that the process drill down from the aggregate allocations to the party allocations, they seem not to flow as smoothly. And I would hope that first and foremost, of course, parties should within themselves negotiate as strongly as they can, and so that only if there are issues they disagree with, they can go back to the political parties fund. But this is certainly one of the most important things, and we hope that through these kinds of funds, they won't just go on bureaucracies or on campaigns around the country, but they'll also be used definitely for capacity building, for training and capacity building. And as I said, my desire would be that we end up with a situation in which we become an issues-oriented political parties rather than the things that seem to drive us at the moment, and these political funds are extremely useful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then I yield my time to somebody else.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Joyce Chepkoech. Honorable Nyoro Ndindi.
Thank you, Chair, for the chance to contribute to Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the chance to contribute to the report by the Special Funds Committee, led by Honorable Kaduri. And Mr. Speaker, I have gone through the report, but even before I come to the specifics, Mr. Speaker, because you are talking about political parties, and political parties are vehicles of democracy, Mr. Speaker, and I am sure even the report you are discussing now, Mr. Speaker, is geared to strengthening all the content and even the monies we give to political parties is in line with strengthening our democracy, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, there is a quote that was said by Sir Winston Churchill that democracy is the worst form of government except for any other. And, Mr. Speaker, in a way, I tend to side with him. Because, Mr. Speaker, I always tend to go through history so that I know where we are, the status we are as a society, and even the best way we can move forward as a democracy, as a nation, and as an economy, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, there are so many examples that actually support that quote by Sir Winston Churchill. Because, Mr. Speaker, there is a very clear correlation between a strengthened democracy, liberalism, Mr. Speaker, pluralism, and also growth in the society, and improved livelihoods and standards of life, Mr. Speaker. And I say so because, Mr. Speaker, if you actually study even mature democracies, like the United States of America itself, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that the society that became more liberal, that is the southern part of America itself, actually became more advanced and actually grew faster, even in terms of per capita income and per capita GDP, than the upper side, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I tend to believe that the opposite of what we have in terms of democracy is where we have strong men, Mr. Speaker, and where we have classes like nobilities, Mr. Speaker, taking the role of leading the others. But, Mr. Speaker, always democracy and liberalism opens up space for every person to participate, and therefore bringing about all talents and bringing about all might in the growth of the society. Because democracy, Mr. Speaker, enhances, Mr. Speaker, the consultations are too high, but I'm trying to cope. Mr. Speaker, democracy enhances meritocracy.
Kindly lower your decibels for the member to concentrate. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I was saying that democracy enhances meritocracy because when we open the arena for everyone, Mr. Speaker, as well or otherwise when we have like nobilities and certain classes, Mr. Speaker, we are able to get the best from the many. Other than when we have a closed system, Mr. Speaker, where the leadership can only be chosen from a certain class or a certain family, Mr. Speaker, as it was before, Mr. Speaker, before advancement of democracy. And, Mr. Speaker, there are so many examples to cite. Because, Mr. Speaker, if you even go through the history of Europe itself, Mr. Speaker, the real growth in Europe actually started, and especially the UK, came about after the Glorious Revolution, Mr. Speaker, where a new set of laws, Mr. Speaker, that advanced people to choose their leaders and people to be liberal and actually give their talents into the leadership of the nation, that we started seeing real development actually in the that actually embraced democracy then before us and before so many other African countries, Mr. Speaker, is doing much better economically, socially, and in all other areas of life, Mr. Speaker, as a nation. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the other solid examples is actually the Meiji Restoration of Japan. Mr. Speaker, because as you know, before around 1860, Japan was being ruled by a strong fist, Mr. Speaker, by emperors who were very strong. But, Mr. Speaker, after the Emperor Meiji came and actually instituted some set of laws, one of them that advanced democracy by making sure that serious decisions of the society and the nation were being made by the assembly, Mr. Speaker, Japan actually, within a span of 42 years, it became a superpower, Mr. Speaker, from a country that was an isolationist country, Mr. Speaker, there before, and a country that was wallowing in poverty. Mr. Speaker, however, going through this report and looking at the Kenyan situation as it is now, Mr. Speaker, I tend to think that we need to do so much in terms of voter education. Because, Mr. Speaker, so often, after every 5 years, we go to the ballot. But, Mr. Speaker, we need to ask ourselves this critical question. When we go to the ballot, what are the voters always going to vote for, Mr. Speaker? And I'm talking this insofar as the upper seats, and especially the presidency, is concerned. Mr. Speaker, we will lie to ourselves by thinking that because we have an IEBC that has got a huge budget, that our democracy functions properly. Mr. Speaker, in a country like ours, that is grossly divided into ethnical lines, Mr. Speaker, and into tribal lines, Mr. Speaker, I don't think we have a functional democracy, because the current voter goes to the ballot not to elect merit, not to elect qualities, Mr. Speaker, and this is the truth, and especially referring to the presidency when we are going to the elections, but we go, Mr. Speaker, to the ballot to elect our tribesmen. And, Mr. Speaker, when we advance that kind of a thing that we do in this republic, Mr. Speaker, most times we may err, and we may not get the best people, Mr. Speaker, because when we put tribe before merit, Mr. Speaker, we are bound not to elect and actually get the best leadership, Mr. Speaker, for our country. I may not be speaking for the current situation, Mr. Speaker, because we have one of the best presidents, Mr. Speaker, but if we give a level playing ground that everyone, no matter where they come from, they can be elected to the highest office, Mr. Speaker, when we let merit and meritocracy, Mr. Speaker, go ahead of our other subjective thoughts, Mr. Speaker, we are able to get the best, and our country ultimately grows, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is this narrative that is always propagated by the West. In a way, it works. Because, Mr. Speaker, in our country now, I can dare say that perfect democracy actually works from the seat of the governor going downwards. But, Mr. Speaker, it is upon us as leadership to know that even if we have IEBC, Mr. Speaker, and even if we go to the ballot every 5 years, Mr. Speaker, every time we go to the elections, when it comes to the presidential seat, Mr. Speaker, the results are always contested. And, Mr. Speaker, that means that we give IEBC many billions, but the outcomes, Mr. Speaker, we never accept them. Mr. Speaker, this may not be actually a problem with the personalities, but we need to relook, Mr. Speaker, whether we need to have a homegrown version of democracy, like the one probably like even China embraced, like the one possibly that is in Morocco, Mr. Speaker, that is quasi-democracy and quasi-mobility of kings, Mr. Speaker, so that, Mr. Speaker, we do not continue holding elections in futility. We need to have a homegrown way of electing our presidency, Mr. Speaker, because the current way of democracy, honestly, it doesn't work. Mr. Speaker, going through this report, I have seen that my party, last financial year, got around 240 million shillings, Mr. Speaker, to run our affairs. And, Mr. Speaker, I tend to believe that actually the beneficiaries of democracy is not necessarily us, the elected leaders, but even the population, the general Wajiko, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I am pleading and asking even this House, Mr. Speaker, that we need to relook at how we also fund our political parties. Because I believe the money that is given, like my party being given 240 million, Mr. Speaker, is enough to run our affairs without necessarily having us.
Honorable member for Kiharu, you know you only have so much time. Had you finished your contribution? Yeah, you will have just 1 minute. But the rest of members, please remember that you have 10 minutes to contribute.
Mr. Speaker, my point was because especially major political parties are already receiving so much funding from GOK and from taxpayers. They need not go ahead again and make us contribute more funds, Mr. Speaker, because we already have sufficient funding from GOK in advancement of our democracy. And I say this because we are not the only beneficiaries of democracy as the elected leaders, but the entire nation. And because we are also part of the taxpayers, we need not be taxed twice. Here in the House, Mr. Speaker, and also when we fund our political parties using public funds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Very well. The Honorable Mwashako, member for Wundanyi.
And this bill, Mr. Speaker, was touching on the political parties fund. The question is based on the presidential votes. So in this case, Mr. Speaker, the tabulation based on our presidential candidate was Raila Amolo Odinga. If you do it on a NASA coalition, it should be able to give you a higher percentage than this that has been allocated. So it is indeed important that the registrar of political parties, this matter must be revisited. Because in this case, it is only ODM. And it's getting 30%. That is 112 million. Jubilee has gotten the 240 million. So we are questioning this. Because the coalition was done officially, in line with the Political Parties Act, it was deposited at the Register of Political Parties. So the allocation that is coming here under ODM should have been higher. Because traditionally and ordinarily, this money is supposed to come through ODM, then ODM will share with the siblings. But in this case, where has the money gone to, Mr. Speaker? These are the questions we are asking, and this matter must be revisited. The Register of Political Parties, wherever you are, you must be listening to me. And it's the officer who is accountable when it comes to the political parties fund, Mr. Speaker. So we don't want this issue to continue. At a later stage, we must revisit this matter so that this huge amount that is going to Jubilee can be reversed and be given to the ODM so that the other siblings can also benefit, Mr. Speaker. The import of political parties fund, Mr. Speaker, was there to strengthen democracy. Because in this country, it has been known that the political parties belong to some individuals. And if a political party belongs to an individual, the principles of democracy are going to be, they are going to go contrary to the principles of democracy. We revisit the amendments of this political parties fund because the success of the political parties today relies on this Political Parties Act, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I also want to mention briefly when it comes to the issue of the time value of money. Mr. Speaker General has no issue. I had raised this matter with Lucy, the Registrar of Political Parties, and she had mentioned that this is going to bring audit queries, Mheshimiwa. But when I spoke to the Auditor General, it cannot bring a query so long as you disclose that
country. And it is the high time that while this money is also given out, let it not also be given without any guidelines. Because once the money lands in these offices, we don't know exactly what happens thereafter. So much as it is a good thing to do in order to enhance democracy and civic education, it should also be given with guidelines so that people at the local levels can also be able to enjoy the leadership, or to have this civic education spill down even to the villages. And the other thing is the adherence to Section 24 of the Political Parties Act, which requires that 0.3% of the national government money revenue, or the money collected by the national government, should be shared amongst the political parties after meeting the thresholds. And I believe instead of wasting also money or government money by political parties tribunal going to court to defend what is already in law, as it was already witnessed in previously, it should be able to comply right from the one go.
One of the other areas that also needs to be looked at, actually, what we know is if money has already been disbursed to political parties and in the tune of hundreds of millions, then attend to other things. So I believe this is a good report, and Mr. Speaker, I do support.
The Honorable Leader for Majority, you have something to say to this? The Honorable Millie, you'll be Odhiambo.
Select Committee established pursuant to Standing Order 205A. And this committee, Mr. Speaker, is to look into the accounts of the Equalization Fund, the Political Parties Fund, the Judiciary, the National Government Constituency Development Fund, and such other funds established by law as the Speaker office or the use of public funds contrary to the law or instructions, that person is liable for any loss arising from the use and shall make good the loss where the person remains the holder of that office. So the people who run our political parties must be held accountable within the reading of that article in the Constitution. Again, in section 68(1) of the PFM Act of 2012, inter alia, it also provides, and I read, Mr. Speaker, an accounting officer for the national government entity, Parliamentary Service Commission, and the judiciary shall be accountable to the National Assembly for ensuring that the resources of the respective parties act. And I am happy that the only two parties that can access these resources in this 12th Parliament is Jubilee and ODM. The rest, I'm very sorry to say, they have to fund the operation of their small briefcase parties. Briefcase parties from their other resources. The committee also observed that the registrar of political parties had taken administrative measures aimed at resolving some of the concerns which were raised by the Auditor General. The Auditor General, when he looked at the books of political parties, their concerns have been taken administratively measures in dealing with how political parties manage the fund. When it comes to the fund allocation criteria, this committee, and I support them, observed that the revenue allocated to political parties fund is based on the criteria adopted by the National Treasury, where out of the total revenue received and audited, allocations are first made on the public debt, which we have no problem, on pensions, yes, constitutional salaries, county governments, parliament, judiciary, constitutional commissions, equalization fund, and then the balance is used to determine allocation to political parties. This often results to underfunding of political parties. Kenya is a political party democracy. You cannot have this house inaugurated without political parties doing their nominations. Then on the basis of their nomination and the list submitted to IBC, the citizens elect leaders who will sit in this house. So why do you make the payment to political parties at the bottom of your list? It's not fair. And I am sure we will agree that the CS National Treasury will listen to the recommendation of the committee. The committee made a number of observations, and one of it, which is important, is the implementation of the information conformity and their disaster recovery plan, which they recommended that the registrar of political parties must ensure the implementation of the information conformity and disaster recovery plan during this financial year 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, finally, compliance with the provisions on the funding, the committee further recommended that the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Planning comply with the provisions of Section 24, subsection 1A of the Political Parties Act, which requires that the sources of the fund shall not be less than 0.3% of the revenue collected by the national government as may be provided by Parliament. And I think Honorable Wanda is not here. I think Parliament is also under obligation. Parliament is failing, and it's a Public Accounts Committee, by not submitting and approving the latest audited accounts provided by the Auditor General. We are dealing with accounts of 2013-2014. And it's based on how this House approves those accounts that will be used in the even sharing of revenue between the two levels of government. It makes a determination on how much is allocated to CDF. It makes a determination on how much is allocated to political parties. And I think Parliament and the Public Accounts Committee must work overnight and make sure that in the next session of next year, at least we approve the audited accounts by the Auditor General, at least for 2016, 2017, if not 2017, 2018, once they are tabled. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to say that and be proud that I am a member of a party that receives these resources. And the Honorable Osoro, going forward, my friend, and you know I'm a pastoralist. In the pastoralist, the guys who make decisions depends on how many camels you have. So if you have 2 camels, your business is to be part of the implementing agency. The decision is made by those who have over 100 camels. So that you be part of a bigger party. And I'm sure you will start with Jubilee. And then see whether ODM has something better than Jubilee. But I'm sure by the time you're in Jubilee, you're at home. Even now, you are with the Jubilee. But the next election, we will make sure that you get the required nomination if the people vote for you. But I think the gist of this matter is that political parties are no longer the property of individuals. Political parties are no longer the property of a community or a region. Political parties now belong to the people, and there's no conflict of interest. They will be funded by the taxpayers. So I really want to support this report and support the committee for a job well done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Leader of Majority, that is as it should be. The Cabinet Secretary for Treasury has got no wiggle room, really, when it comes to this fund. This is a fund that has been created by the Constitution, and it is the duty of every Kenyan to uphold the Constitution. The Honorable Odhiambo, member for Suba North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the committee for this report. Mr. Speaker, my comments would be very few. I think it's a lot of it is in tandem with what other members have said. One, Mr. Speaker, I think it is incumbent upon the government to ensure that we follow the Constitution so that the stipulated amount that should go to political parties actually do go to political parties. And it is true that political parties, the direction we are taking as a country is to institutionalize political parties so that they are at the level that we have seen where countries that are democrats, that have gone through proper democracy, or we should say so, are going. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I'm saying it's, I'm putting a precaution, Mr. Speaker, is because I've been observing keenly even the election of the United States that have just recently been concluded. And I think there's something that they can learn also from struggling democracies like us. And we'd urge them not to learn the negative things, because I see, you know, for the first time, we are seeing that they were having kids that were failing. Some people were alleging rigging, you know, and I was looking at them, is this Kenya or is this the United States? But that aside, Mr. Speaker, we have always emulated countries like the United States. Kenya has had its problems, but if we actually give the money to the political parties the way that they should be giving, Mr. Speaker, then our political parties will get an opportunity to institutionalize, and that would depersonalize political parties, as the members have been saying. And Mr. Speaker, you won't be having things such as the one that we are seeing today in the papers, that KANU offices is going to be sold because they are not able to sell, they are not able to service just electricity bills over years, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if we want to rely on the good charity of founder members of the parties to be the ones that are paying bills, then definitely, if I'm the one paying the bills, I become the owner of the party. But if the government gives ODM its due money under the Political Parties Act. So I would just want to urge that even this time, as we are putting, I know it's something that has come before our Committee of Budget, and we pushed very strongly for it, because it is not good when it is Parliament that sets the trends by violating the law that we are the ones who have set up. That part of really ensuring that our parties mature is to make sure that we give and enable our parties to have the monies for their operations, and even for them to practice internal democracy. Part of the internal democracy would be ensuring that they undertake civic education, that they put structures and systems in place that would ensure inclusivity of women or persons with disabilities, and also to bring people from areas where there are minorities that without support of parties would not be able to come in. But it would also ensure a fair playing field for most parties. I know a lot of us, even when Honorable Duale was speaking, I know nowadays, because especially of the issue of the handshake, we are not hitting each other very hard. But I'm sure if it was pre-handshake, you would have really hit us on the issue of party primaries. And I can say that the Jubilee tried to some level. But again, they tried because they were able to gain over and above more resources than other parties because of where they were placed by history. That they were at a place at a time where they are able to get resources and get their share, their fair share, when other parties were not able to get. But if every party is able to get their fair share, then every party should be able to conduct their nominations very fairly and very freely. Sometimes I see what we are expecting political parties to do, and we are expecting, you know, almost impossible feats from political parties. If you look at even the way national elections are conducted, the Electoral Commission itself is unable to do or undertake a process that people feel even 60% comfortable with. But we are expecting political parties to undertake party primaries that are even more contested than the national elections, with even the least resources. And Mr. Speaker, we expect to get good results. If we want our political parties to be mature, we want our political parties to perform, we want our political parties to be inclusive, then we must make sure that we give them the resources to enable them professionalize and to enable them undertake the mandate that the political parties should have by law. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
The Honorable Ambugu Gunjiri, member for Nyeri Town.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support this report. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak about the context in which the decision was made to constitutionalize the amount of money that is supposed to be funded, that's supposed to be given to political parties. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is a growing democracy, and we are pushing ourselves to be a party democracy. We are coming from a background where we are trying to make political parties bigger than the individuals who control them or who run them or who fund them. Mr. Speaker, when we start having challenges of funding, or when Treasury, for example, decides it's up to them to decide how much money they can allocate to the political parties, we are doing a disservice to this country. Mr. Speaker, it is important for us to understand that when the government or when public funds are used to fund a political establishment, then you actually are also allowing for public scrutiny of the operations of that institution. Mr. Speaker, it is important for government to understand that for purposes of transparency, we do need to get this money going to political parties. We need it to be going as has been constitutionally mandated. We need that percentage that is in the Constitution to be what goes to the political parties. Mr. Speaker, we are not going to grow our democracy as a country if we do not fund political parties. We are not going to create institutions, even if beyond even the political parties, if we do not learn how to institutionalize the political processes of our country. Mr. Speaker, when I think about some of the experiences, and I listen to some of my colleagues speak about the primaries, Mr. Speaker, we expect political parties to generate political candidates who then go to IEBC. If we do not fund the structure of how these political parties generate these candidates, then we go and blame the IEBC because they did the wrong thing, while the mistakes were actually made at the political party stage. It is important, and I want to just appeal to the Register of Political Parties to learn how to lobby and to keep talking to Parliament for us to ensure that every year the amount of money that is supposed to go to the political parties goes to the political parties so that our parties can become strong. Mr. Speaker, it would be nice if Kenya had the kind of political structure that the developed countries have, where we know that I am a member of Jubilee because of the following policies, because of the following, the things that we stand for. And the only way we're going to get here is if we get the kind of funding that we need to get from government. We need to get these funds coming from the members for the public so that our parties can stand out and start competing on ideologies rather than on personality politics, Mr. Speaker. I therefore want to strongly recommend this report, but also to ask that the people who are trying to make the decisions of how to, or creating wiggle room about how they allocate funds to the political parties or the priority of how these funds get to the political parties, to realize that in this house, we all represent political parties. We are the ones making decisions on how funds are going and where they're going. It is important for them to understand that we need our parties funded so that they can also create secretariats that support the work that we do in this house. Because if we have secretariats in our parties pushing an agenda of the party, whether it's a party that is in the minority or the party in the majority, we are going to have a lot more robust political debate and progress in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, mine is to support this report, and I pray that the decisions that we make in terms of the amount of money that's supposed to be allocated is going to be done according to the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well spoken, Honorable Member Fonyeri. The Honorable Osoro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I really wanted to speak earlier because my name was being used as an example of the members of Parliament who happen to be in this house courtesy of purported small parties. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I wish to state that I support the report. I rise to support from the onset because in my view, this is a step towards a right direction, but we are not yet there. What honorable members term to be bigger political parties, Honorable Speaker, in my view, are not big parties. I wish we could actually be honest to ourselves. Political parties in this country are personal properties. And some of the political parties that people call briefcase parties happen to be bigger parties than what is called a bigger party. Because we've personalized our political parties, that if the party leader decides to fold that particular briefcase, and I'll give an example, although Honorable Duale used my name, and I needed to remind him that he was in a political party that the party leader decided to fold his briefcase. That was actually the briefcase party called URP. The party leader decided to fold that briefcase, opened another briefcase, joined with His Excellency the President. They opened another briefcase, and most of the members who are here are following that briefcase party. But the party that I came to this house, with the Kenya National Congress, even upon the exit of the party leader, Peter Kenneth, the party still stands. And that is why there are members of parliament in this house. Under that party, we've got about 40 MCAs across the country. But in 2022, if again this briefcase called Jubilee or this briefcase called ODM is rebranded another name, that person holding that briefcase will have so many followers. So in my view, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Soro.
Yes.
The Kenya National Congress, is it the one that was founded by the late Honorable Anyona?
No. That is Kenya Social Congress.
Oh, that was social.
Yes. This is Kenya National Congress, which is one of the oldest parties. It was actually registered in 1982. If you ask any member of this house who's in a party that was registered even 90s, none of them. Most of
this one you belong to was registered in 1982.
1982. So this is the biggest party. This is actually not a briefcase. This is actually the biggest party. It is not a briefcase party as they purport to say. And it has had, of course, several party leaders. But even upon their exit, we still have people getting to the office. They cannot give any instructions. Even in this house, even whipping. Whipping is done by the party leaders only. The party leaders call the members and give them directions. It's never a round table discussion. It is never a discussion of members of parliament. So they're actually not major parties.
The Honorable Soro, the Honorable Shirley has a point of order. Is it a point of order, Honorable Shirley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have been listening keenly to my brother, Honorable Soro, as he gave his contribution. And I was wondering whether he is contributing to a bill that is before this House, or he is meant to be responding to what the leader of majority said. Mr. Speaker, in the course of his contribution, he touched on a live wire, Mr. Speaker, when he mentioned about whipping. Mr. Speaker, I am the whip of the majority side of this House. And I want to assure this House that when it comes to whipping, it's none other than Honorable Benjamin Jomo Washiali, who is the whip of my majority. And there is no any other time that the leadership, and in this case, the party leader and his deputy and whoever he is talking about whipping from outside, has ever done the work of a whip. Not unless my colleague does not know what whipping is all about, I want to advise him that I'm the whip. But is it in order, Mr. Speaker, to mislead this House that the whipping in this House is done by the party leadership? Thank you.
The Honorable Soro.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I need to be very clear, and I really wish that Honorable Washiali was honest at least once. He knows. Honorable Washiali cannot whip members by himself. He can't actually wake up in the morning and decide to whip. He'll have to get instructions from the party leader, and that is the truth.
The Honorable Soro, I think you are going beyond.
I withdraw that statement. But then, as I conclude, I want to say that in as much as we are supporting the report, we need to now go extra mile. And I was actually giving a challenge to the relevant committee and even this House that we need to go extra mile. For democracy to grow, we need to stop personalizing political parties and allow expansion of various parties. We need to support even those purported small parties. Give them funding. Let a person run from whichever party they wish to run from, because it's actually, at the end of the day, people don't vote parties. They vote, once. They vote once, ideas in regard when one is campaigning. So we need to stop personalizing political parties. And finally, these purported major parties should be honest. They've received money. They've received money from the political parties fund. They need to be honest with themselves and share. If it's NASA, share with the other political parties that were with you. Even if, don't say that now that we were shortchanged, we'll also shortchange you. They should share this money with the other parties that were with them. If it is Jubilee, we saw His Excellency the President, wearing capes of different smaller parties. This Jubilee party should equally share the money to the other smaller parties so that they can also grow. And finally, Mr. Speaker, if we support this funding, political funding by the state, by, of course, by the state, we also need to look at ourselves in the House. Then ask ourselves, and I saw my colleague yesterday say that we ought to have, we need to continue, giving out money every month, contributing to the political parties. In my view, if the government is supporting the political parties, we need now to restructure that political parties should also not be taking money from members of parliament to run their affairs. I mean, what are you running? Because the money is already given by the government. Why should you make members contribute on they already paid for bill? Because this money is meant for the bill, settlement and wages for the staff members. And it's enough to settle everything. So, and as I said, these are personalized parties, so it's actually enough. It's about 4 people working in those parties. The other parties, the other officers that you see around are actually just, for image purposes. So I oppose the contribution made by honorable members every month because it's actually unnecessary. The government settles that, and that should be what we should actually be supporting. And with that, I still support this, but we need to review. All political parties that have members of parliament in the House should be funded. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
A very, very good contribution. The Honorable Osoro, you might want to put your head together with the Honorable Christopher Malwa. He had made some proposals in the direction that you seem to be suggesting in the last parliament. And from his contribution, I think he's still keen to go in that direction so that we might have a vibrant political party culture in our country. But very good contributions, nevertheless. The Honorable Oluoch, the member for Mathare. He'll be followed by the Honorable Kaunya Oku. So the Honorable Kaunya Oku, prepare your thoughts. You will be having the mic after the Honorable Oluoch.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Allow me to add my voice and support this report by the Special Accounts Funds Committee. I wanted to add a little context to what my friend, Honorable Gunjiri, had said and which context is within the confines of the Constitution. The Constitution has indeed entrenched the position and the place of political parties in the current dispensation. So that can no longer be overemphasized or gainsaid. And the second point that I want to say is that in deciding whether or not to fund political parties, the question is not if, because a decision of the High Court in 2015, and which I placed before the chambers, indeed stated that Parliament and Treasury does not have the discretion. When you read the wordings of sections 24 to 25, and it talks about 0.3, it says every year at least. That word has been interpreted by our High Court to mean that this House has discretion to place or to allocate money above the zero of the lapse that we had. The last time I was told when I raised the issue by way of a statement is that Treasury never placed that in its policy statement. So Treasury now should be notified, should be put on notice that come the next financial year, we do not expect that things that are statutory, you wait until you come before the floor of the House and members are trying to ask, how will our political parties survive? With those, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Very well spoken, the Honorable Oluoch. The Honorable Oku.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to support this report on the audited financial statements for the Political Parties Fund for the year ending June 2017. I want to point out that actually political parties in Africa and the Kenyan political parties we have are parties that are more personalized in the sense that they did not have funding. The main problem is of lack of institutionalization of these political parties is the lack of funding. And therefore, most of the politicians or the individuals who register political parties become also the main source of funding of these political parties. And therefore, the decision, and especially the passage of the Political Parties Act and the provision of those funds, therefore, for the parties that qualify, was a welcome move. However, we need to support and strengthen more so in terms of continued funding within the 3% requirement, the 0.3%, and at the same time, it would be important even to increase this funding, especially for those parties that meet the requirement. I want to say that for our democracy to thrive, the political parties are the main tool through which the elected representatives are selected. Because democracy as a government of the people thrives through representative leaders who are elected by the people. And for our elected or a democracy where the elected leaders are elected to thrive, then these political parties through which they are selected must be strong enough and should have, with the provision of these funds by the Treasury, if they are not properly managed and if they are not reaching the ground where they are supposed to serve the citizens, then again it will defeat the purpose. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this report, and I believe that is the way for our success of democracy in this country to get strengthened. Thank you.
Well, shall we have Honorable Mwashako, member for Udanyi? That particular member took leave. Okay, Honorable Dr. Otiende Amolo, member for Arieda. That member has also taken leave. Honorable Wetangula Wanyonyi, at least I can see you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm present.
Yes, please, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I also want to support this report. Mr. Speaker, political parties are in existence as a constitutional requirement because Kenya is a multi-party democracy as recognized by the Constitution. And political parties, Mr. Speaker, cannot run on the whims of individuals. They must be given proper funding, and this funding must come from, as allocated from the National Treasury. Mr. Speaker, this report indicates that the political parties have not been given money for several years, several financial years, and the committee is recommending that the minister should comply. And I agree with them, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why when it comes to matters of political parties, she indicated that the money that was that's supposed to go the political parties was way above what governance and justice, law and order, chair laws can handle, so that the money can be thrown directly, Mr. Speaker, from the consolidated fund. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, this is something that we need to look at it carefully, especially the Committee on Appropriation, to make sure that the political parties are not starved of the funding. Because when the parties are not functioning, and some parties have just come up, Mr. Speaker, they form themselves just around the election, and after election, most of them exit. So for the parties to remain focused and develop democracy in this country, we need to have them to be stable and also not to rely on individual contributions. Even though members are supposed to contribute, Mr. Speaker, as a show of of membership and even the loyalty to the party and subscription. But that should not be the only source of funding, because parties cannot survive on that kind of money, because that money only comes around the election. So we need to have consistency in allocation, and then all the monies that has not been given the political parties should be released. This is what is calling strangling parties, and because these parties have overheads that they need to deal with, Mr. Speaker. And when they are not functioning, some of them just wind up and go away. They have offices, they have staff members, they have everything to run, and for them even to prepare. You realize, Mr. Speaker, when it comes around election time, we have to do a nomination, we have to do party membership, we have to do so many other things. So this all requires funding. And ODM is supposed to be one of the beneficiaries from this allocation, Mr. Speaker. When you look, ODM is supposed to be given 112 million, or 30.24% of the allocation. And Mr. Speaker, this, just in case that this is one of the national, a party with a national outlook and has drawn members from all over the country, and it's not an outfit that you can describe as a briefcase party. This is one of the, in fact, the oldest party now, other than KANU, which KANU has disappeared, although previously they may say that KANU will rule for 100 years. But now it seems that KANU is no longer in the picture. So it's ODM and Jubilee that actually they are the largest and the beneficiary of this funding. And Mr. Speaker, even in a coalition, it just has to be a local agreement. You cannot, the coalition partners cannot just make unnecessary noises that they want allocation, but when they agree within the political parties, then they can be given a share of what is allocated to their bigger brother. Mr. Speaker, I support this report, and I agree that the CS for National Treasury should move quickly and release the funds to the political parties, Mr. Speaker, to enable these political parties to remain focused and also enhance democracy in our country. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for giving me a chance, and I support this report.
Honorable Deputy Karia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this report. Honorable Speaker, this country has had a lot of issues and history regarding political parties. And I think with the new law that required that, serious, strong political parties to be given some funding for them to be able to operate. Honorable Speaker, I remember one day I was a member of Mother Karua's NAC Kenya, and we were forced to be paying from our own pockets. But at the same time, you find a political party has quite a few number of members in parliament, but that does not stop, much as we are not giving. I know we were here when we were passing this law in the 10th parliament, but I think it is also important, Honorable Speaker, that as we try to encourage serious, strong political parties that are going to last, we also need to look at these small parties. Of course, it's my honors to, if we want for it to be changed, that as Honorable my brother Wanyonyi has just indicated, that in a coalition they can agree on how much can be given to a political party that has not attained the threshold of the number of members of parliament in a house. However, Honorable Speaker, it is also important. When we saw the former President Mwai Kibaki actually was elected twice on different parties. Later, we have Jubilee, again, Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, again was elected on a TNA, and then later on a Jubilee. I think it is important for us as a country to start trying to strengthen policies and ideologies of parties so that we can be able to support these political parties, not because they belong to particular regions or particular individuals. And I want to thank my party, which started this very, very important aspect of looking to be more of a national political party than a regional political party. And Jubilee started, and I'm happy before this House that almost in more than half of the counties, we have a member of Jubilee Party in Parliament from the 47 counties. I think we have over almost more than half, almost 30 counties where we have, and it is a good indicator where Jubilee, with its manifesto, intends to be there for quite a number of time. Honorable Speaker, one of the scholars, the former Patrick Lumumba, who we thought was a very good person when he was at the EACC, once made a very, very disturbing comment that as members like myself, I'm a live member of Jubilee Party, but Jubilee Party will die before I die. And that was his comment, that most of these political parties where you become life member, they die before you die. And I think he had a very strong sentiment. If you look at that aspect, it is true. For example, now TNA, where we were life member, is already gone. If you look at other than KANU, I really want to thank the members of KANU Party who have strongly been believed in their party, and they have lived in their party. But this aspect of today it is this, and then next time we change because of change of persons from one political party to the other, I think it is important for us. But more importantly so, Honorable Speaker, it is for us, if you look at Jubilee has already gone international. We have sent already our party officials to China to go and understand how to strengthen our political party. And I think it is important, and they cannot be able to do that without funding. As we are talking now, Honorable Speaker, as a member of Jubilee, I have already subscribed, and we contribute monthly contributions towards the party. But at the same time, we are also asking this party to start taking its work seriously, to strengthen its manifesto and its belief. It is very unfortunate, Honorable Speaker, looking at what is happening at the county assemblies. Every single day, a speaker is being ejected, the governor, and it is very shameful. And these MCAs are members of a political party. It is a high time that the political party took some stance action against these unfortunate events that are happening all over the country. Today it is this county, the following day. And the rules are very clear, and I hope these MCAs understand what it means to be a speaker. First, the rules are very clear, and the law is very clear, that you cannot be a member of a county assembly and then at the same time become a county assembly speaker. And I think it is important that the political party start taking serious action against this audit of financial statement for the political parties for the year ended June 2017 is an eye-opener. And as Honorable Wanyonyi has just indicated, it is the high time the Treasury Cabinet Secretary should, with immediate effect. And again, we shouldn't be begging for the Treasury to be releasing this money to political parties. Political parties have offices. And today, I was checking in the newspaper, and a court has ruled that KANU will be losing their only house and office in Nakuru because of debt of electricity bills. It is very unfortunate that a whole party can lose such a huge investment because they cannot be able to pay for their electricity bills. And I think it is important that the Treasury releases the money so that political parties can be able to do their business. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support the report. Thank you.
Honorable Owino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really appreciate this time. Many has been said about this report, and I want to add to my voice that I also support it. Mr. Speaker, this is the highest lawmaking house, and when we pass an act, I don't think we should be begging anybody to follow it. And in the recommendation for this committee, especially 4.2, that asks the CS to comply, I think should have read, he must comply with the resolution that is made in the Act, especially the section 24.1a, which is our Political Act 2011. Once it is said, just like CDF, we don't beg anybody, and it should, Mr. Speaker, be only for the members of Parliament that what pertains to us is implemented to the latter. All those which are in the Act should be, must be, let me say, must be followed. Also, Mr. Speaker, let me add this, that the functional structures of every party is what is making the quality of the House. What do I mean by this? The vetting procedures and how it is done with the capacities of the political parties. If right, and should be right, if they are well funded, then you will have quality of members coming to the House, and that will also improve the deliberations of this House. So I want to support this, and I want to say that the 0.3% that was agreed on, as one member said here, it should be in the supplementary 2, if that has to be, but it ought to have been in the first one, or in the budget implemented as it was done. But I want to refute some of the words that have been used here. Mr. Speaker, there's nothing like personal parties. Talk of ODM. This is the largest party with members who are very brilliant, think of their own, and for a member to lump them that they are personal property of somebody, that is a disgrace. And of course, I think the same with Jubilee. There was also a word used here, briefcase. Maybe some members do not know what a briefcase is. This is where you fold all the documents and you work with them. Briefcase parties, even for the small party, it should be lumped as briefcase party. They are operating within the law. And it is this House that passes the law. So sometimes we have to consider what we say and how we say them. What is right is that the larger party cannot have the equal share with the smaller parties. But the smaller parties have the opportunity to grow and become larger parties. And that's why it may have to review how the smaller parties can be helped. Because the bottom line is, how do we grow to mature democracy? It has to be functional structures, which need some resources to make them grow. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance, and I really support the report. Thank you.
Very well. Honourable members, I shall now call the chairperson, Special Funds Accounts Committee, to reply, considering there is no further interest on this particular one. The chairperson?
I'm here.
Very well. That is, no, you can't. Usually to reply, you must get specific, express and direct instruction from the particular person. So, Honorable, that must be Honorable
Kivasu.
Kivasu, yes, for the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I got that express understanding to move to reply to these reports, and I thank the members for the contributions that they have given us on this report. And I say, basically on the 0.3%, which is stated within the Political Parties Act, Section 24.1, that not at least 0.3% of the revenue collected should be released to the political parties. I'll say this money is usually going to be very important and necessary, especially to enhance democracy, to strengthen the political parties, and especially when it comes to structures of the political parties, they are going to be able to ensure those structures are in place, the parties are properly managed, and also for the parties' trainings and civic education, with proper financing, they'll be able to do some of those duties properly so that the parties can grow. Equally, I'm looking at the manifestos for the parties. With proper financing, they'll be able to share their manifestos with the constituents, for them to understand what the parties stand for. And we hope with proper financing, we are most likely going to have at most 3 parties strong and stable that the constituents will be relying on during the voting time. At the same time, we have heard about the NASA issue and the ODM. During our deliberations with the political parties registrar, it came out clear that Jubilee and ODM, they are the ones registered with the political parties as per the Act. So some of the statements that are coming should be in-house statements that need to be checked within the NASA and ODM. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm looking at following the release of this report that has been debated well, the release of the audit reports from the political parties. This committee is now geared towards looking at the audit reports from the Auditor General on the political parties, so that again, we table the understanding based on the issues raised to this House, so that they can also debate and see how the money that has been allocated by the political parties fund is used. Mr. Speaker, sir, based on the deliberations, we are also looking at the 0.3 release of the net of the revenue collected, and the non-allocated funds, which has not been released. That money will be crucial for the political parties. And with that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to reply.
Honorable members, I will append putting the question on that particular item to a subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 10. The Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments, number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 13 of 2018, second reading.
Leader of the Majority Party.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment number 2 Bill of National Assembly, Bills number 13 of 2018, to be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, the bill was published on 10th April 2018 and was read for the first time on 18th April 20. And Mr. Speaker, just for the information of the membership of this House, this was also done during induction, that whenever we have minor amendments to statute laws, Mr. Speaker, we usually come up with an amendment bill, and this is the second one. There was another, the earlier one. And this is to help to or otherwise reduce the number of bills that are flowing on the floor, and some of which can be corrected in a miscellaneous of particular acts, and sometimes it's also used to be able to align the current bills to the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we have this approach. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, allow me to give a summary of the amendments of the proposed bills as follows. And Mr. Speaker, I will be mentioning the particular act before I go to the specific areas that have been amended by this miscellaneous, so that members can follow exactly the areas that this miscellaneous amendment bill is touching. The first act, Mr. Speaker, is the Betting, Lotteries, and Gaming Act Cap 131. Mr. Speaker, this amendment bill proposes to amend the Betting, Lotteries and Gaming Act, Cap 131, to enhance the penalties provided in sections 5.4, 8.3, 10.2, 11.4, 59.2, and 61 of the Act. The penalties currently prescribed in the Act are very low, as they have been there since the inception of this Act. The bill also seeks to amend the Act to reduce the amount of betting and lottery tax payable by betting, lottery, and gaming operators. Mr. Speaker, the second act that this miscellaneous amendment bill seeks to amend is the Dairy Industry Act, Cap 336. Mr. Speaker, the dairy industry is very important in this nation. The bill, therefore, proposes to amend the Act as to enlarge the definition of milk to include goat and camel milk. Mr. Speaker, it is actually very surprising that the original Dairy Industry Act had not considered the goat and the camel milk as milk. And yet, Mr. Speaker, if you went in some supermarkets, you will find camel milk on shelves. And, Mr. Speaker, at one time, even some patients who suffer from this AIDS disease have been recommended to be taking goat milk. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it's important that this House recognizes this milk from goat and camel so that we can enhance and recognize the contribution of the milk contributed by these animals. It also seeks to enhance penalties under the regulations on standards and also manner of installation and of operation of milk dispensers. Therefore, I think, Mr. Speaker, it's very, very important that the House agrees with these proposals of amending so that we can be able to take care of other the operations of milk dispensers. The third act that these amendments touch is the Cooperatives Societies Act, Cap 490. And, Mr. Speaker, for those members who would want to know the opinion of the committee, most of these amendments are under the Committee of Trade, Industry, and Cooperatives. And I am sure that this committee, under the leadership of Honorable Kanini Kega, have done a report to this effect, and any member who may not be in the picture of what the committee has made, they should go to room 8 so that they can also be able to share their opinion. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the Cooperative Societies Act, Cap 490, this amendment has proposed to amend the Cooperative Societies Act, Cap 490, by creating a new class of members of cooperative societies targeted towards social impact investments. The bill seeks to safeguard members' rights in the cooperative societies by giving the Cabinet Secretary supervisory powers to prevent oppression of members by creation of such a new classes. Mr. Speaker, further, the bill seeks to limit the voting powers of social impact members to be limited to specific resolutions, maintenance and operation of the proposed special fund, investment committee, remuneration of the specific fund, trust, and similar affairs. That the members would be limited on resolutions that are on special funds, investment committee, remuneration of the special fund, trustee, and similar affairs. Mr. Speaker, the fourth act is the National Hospital Insurance Fund Act number 9 of 1998. And in this is to enable the fund to receive contributions from the national government and the county governments and employers for the administration of employee benefits. Before, Mr. Speaker, that was not the case, and even when this bill, this act was being introduced in 1998, we didn't have the county government. Therefore, majorly is to align it to the current two levels of government, and also to allow employers for the administration of employee benefits. The bill proposes also to expand the scope of the fund by providing health insurance to the indigent in our society. Finally, the bill seeks to change the name of the fund from the National Hospital Insurance Fund to the National Health Insurance Fund, as well as changing the membership of the board of the fund. Mr. Speaker, given that the government is going in for universal health, and this fund would go a long way in supporting this policy of the government, that's why I think the framer of this amendment thought it wise that instead of limiting it to hospital, we should allow it so that it takes care of all other health aspects, so that the mandate of this fund takes care of quite a number of health aspects. The fifth act that this miscellaneous amendment has touched is the Statistical Act number 4 of 2006. And the amendment here majorly, Mr. Speaker, is to streamline the membership of the board of directors of the Bureau and clarify the functions of the board. It also seeks to include the office of the corporation secretary. The bill also amends the first schedule to clarify the role of the national government and the county government, and it proposes to include a new schedule which sets out the fundamental principles relating to statistics. Mr. Speaker, this is self-explanatory, and I'm sure members looking at the bill will see why it is very, very necessary for this amendment to be considered. Mr. Speaker, the sixth act is that one of Energy, number 12 of 2006. Mr. Speaker, these amendments will give the additional function to the Rural Electrification Authority, which function is to collaborate with the county governments and other agencies in facilitating the supply of electricity in order to promote the development of appropriate local capacity in manufacturing. Mr. Speaker, I think this is also self-explanatory. We would include the opinion so that you can also be able to get the report for Treasury from source. The 14th act that has been touched, Mr. Speaker, with this proposed amendment is the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act number 33 of 2015. This proposed amendment is to make provision in relation to the board and the process of procurement by public entities. Is to make provision in relation to the board and the process of procurement by public entities. Mr. Speaker, this is an area that has really caused both the government and even this parliament a lot of headache. And I'm sure you are aware that at one point the procurement officers were asked to stay away, investigation to take place. There is also the lifestyle audit going on, but they just want to expand so that we have more players involved in the board, so that whatever that has been happening on procurement, especially on public entity institutions, does not reoccur. The 15th, sorry, is the Fisheries Management and Development Act number 35 of 2016. Mr. Speaker, the amendments proposed in this bill is to harmonize various definitions in the Act. It also seeks to introduce a new provision which empowers the Cabinet Secretary to make regulations with regard to the conduct of affairs of the Standing Committee and the Technical Committee, and to prescribe the minimum standards for crew working on fishing vessels. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that has also been there for quite some time, and many of our waters, especially in international, in the ocean, in the coast, has been raided, and I think this amendment is just to make sure that we are able to deal with the crew of some specific standards, and that should be done when our team is visiting vessels. Finally, the bill also seeks to introduce the new provisions to streamline the issue of licensing for fisheries activities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I conclude, permit me to observe that the bill is certainly one of the most important bills in this country. With it comes a framework for regulating various sectors in a manner that will ensure the economic development of
2 of 2018. I must say it's an honor to really be seconding this bill when we have our seniors here. In fact, I was sandwiched between two senior members, the father of the house, Honorable Jimmy Angwenyi, and now Honorable Washiali. So in seconding this motion, this bill, Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on three things as much as I want to support the whole 15 statutes that are under review. But I want to single out three statutes that are very dear to me, as much as the rest are also important. The Dairy Industry Act, Cap 336, whereby we are trying to bring about standards and recognition of milk, because there's a whole new definition of milk, because now we are recognizing camel milk and goat milk. And on the same, we are also trying to bring about a levy for KDB, for purposes of standardization. And maybe going forward, as much as I want to second and support, maybe, of course, once we get to committee stage, we'll see the kind of amendments we're going to introduce to the same. Because the levy that is proposed of 1% per kg could be punitive to the farmer, because definitely processors are going to push back the burden of paying the 1% to KDB to our farmers. And of course, that could be discriminatory, because there are questions that beg whether other produce like coffee, like tea, sugarcane, whether the same levies are charged. And therefore, maybe going forward, we're going to look at that. And I think there is going to really elicit some very many questions and interests from different players and representatives of constituencies where dairy farming is done. The other issue is on Crop Act, whereby we're trying to introduce standards also, and encouraging the same, so that then we can realize one of the big four agenda, manufacturing. The issue of value addition. We are coming from constituencies, especially coming from Kinangop, where we're doing a lot of farming. And we are doing things in the traditional way. We produce and sell our produce in raw form. So the issue of value addition that is going to be supported by this act is really important, and that we feel that, I feel personally that it's going to get massive support from this house. The other issue that I want to speak on is the National Health Insurance Fund, which we are transitioning from National Hospital Insurance Fund. And it is important. I know that there are some subsections there that are talking of having an employer match the amount that is paid by the employee. And this is going to really bring about social support and help us in realization of universal health coverage. Because in fact, there are senior members of society who cannot pay. We have issues of retired teachers and retired civil servants who really cannot afford to even sustain paying their obligation of national health insurance, their obligation to National Health Insurance Fund. And therefore, if employers are going to match up the amount that is paid by the employees, then we're going to have a fund that is, that is able to cater for those who are not able to pay. Like we have the same provision in NSSF Act. Then, of course, finally, as I second, I also want to touch on the issue of Public Procurement and Disposal Act, whereby we've seen some challenges in procurement because of the law. And now those issues are going to be addressed with the amendment of this act of, that's PPPDA 2015. So really, I want to take this opportunity to second and to support the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, wish to propose a question, which is that the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendments number 2, Bill, National Assembly Bill number 13 of 2018 be now read a second time. What is your point of order, Honorable Mwadi?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir. And I appreciate the moving and seconding of this very important miscellaneous act. But at the same time, Honorable Speaker, I'm seeing we are dealing with 15 different statutes, which are touching on very key areas where I expect members of this National Assembly to be present in enough numbers, especially when I contribute, because I really want to touch on several of these. And so, given the fact that my eyes are telling me we don't have quorum, I rise on standing order number 95, to bring to your attention that we don't have quorum. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Kali, you can't have another point of order before I have I have spoken to that one particularly. Honorable Kali, I may not entertain your point of order at this time because there can be no further business until I have established that. Okay. Well, I order that the division bell be rung for 10 minutes. There is no quorum. At 2:30 p.m.